Hi everyone, and welcome to the last part of my webinar. In part 3, we'll talk about how you can plan for kinesthetic learners and reading and writing learners in class and in your distance learning materials. So let's start with kinesthetic learners. So kinesthetic learners learn by doing. So it's important that you include lots of high energy, fast activities, good pace. And you should always follow up quick-paced, fast activities with slower, calming activities. For example, you might have a group game where your students are split into different groups, and that kind of high energy activity could be followed by a slower and calmer activity like a silent or independent worksheet. You should also include a variety of different instruction types, so fast and slow activities, verbal, written, and visual instruction. Also, allow your students to get out of their seat from time to time. Your kinesthetic learners usually need some kind of movement activity as well. And if you want to control when your students get out of their seats, you should build in movement exercises and rest breaks, just to have your students have that time to break from learning and to move around a little bit. You can also give your kinesthetic learners tasks during the lecture, such as note-taking or completing a graphic organizer, or even answering set questions. And you should also try and keep your lectures short and clear. Remember, long and complicated lectures and lots of talking can lose the attention of your kinesthetic learners, so keep them short and sweet. Practical movement tasks are really helpful too. So you can ask your kinesthetic learners to hand out materials or clean the whiteboard. And these kind of activities are great for when students are coming in to class or leaving the class, or even between activities. It helps to keep your kinesthetic learners engaged and keep them moving. So kinesthetic learners learn through expression. They learn and express themselves through movement. So it's important to have different types of moving activities, such as role play, drama, and games. Another idea is to use what we call station rotation activities. So station rotation basically means having different places in your classroom set for different activities or topics. You can divide your students into groups. Each group starts at one activity, and then they move from one activity to the next after your time limit is finished. Station rotation activities are really good because they allow you to have a variety of different activities at the same time. And you can have your students focus on different topics. And it keeps your students moving, which is really important. Also include rest breaks into your lessons. They're just as important as having different types and speeds of activities. A 2-minute rest break in the middle of a lesson is always a good idea. So this is an example of a station rotation activity for English. So usually in station rotation, you have one group at each station. As you can see, there's 4 stations here. So you can have different types of activity at each station. And it's also good to color code your different stations, so it's easy for you to explain where you want students to go at different times. So for example, you could have Say, Sumit, you should be at the blue station doing the reading activity. So usually there's a time limit for each activity. So say each group would have maybe 5 minutes for each activity. And once that time's finished, you tell the groups to stand up and move to their next station. So this is an example of station rotation for maths. So again, you can see 4 different stations, color-coded, and the topic here is multiplication. So having station rotation activities allows you to have different ways of learning multiplication at each activity station. So it helps with different learning styles. So for example, your auditory learners will benefit from having oral multiplication tables practice. And your kinesthetic learners would benefit from having a physical grouping activity. Sorry, your visual learners would benefit from having a physical grouping activity. Could be with counters. Your reader-writer learners could have a 2-step multiplication worksheet to complete, and your kinesthetic learners could have a multiplication whiteboard game that they could do. So this really helps for all of your learners to learn multiplication in a number of different ways. Okay, one last station rotation example. This is topic-based station rotation, and the topic is technology. So the idea is to have students learn about how technology has changed the way we live. At the blue station, students would learn about news and media. They might have a reading activity to do, and then some group discussion or questions. And the same for food, how technology has changed the way we produce and eat food over time, and the same with travel and communication. So this activity is based on different parts of one topic. So technology is the topic, and the idea is to have students learn all these different subtopics. It's great for discussion, and you should also have a feedback at the end where students feedback what they thought about the different technology, the impact of technology on different areas, and they can show what they've learned. So drama activities are also very good for kinesthetic learners. They help students to learn creatively and express themselves creatively. Drama activities are really good for social, Nepali. You could teach stories, historical events, health, and even social awareness. So, for example, in English, if you're learning a novel, you could have students split into groups, and they could recreate different scenes or events from a story. In social, groups could recreate different events from a historical person's life. Or again, in social, you could have students create and practice skits on protecting the environment. So drama is a great way for students to learn and also to practice their understanding and show what they know. So physical objects help visual and kinesthetic learners to understand concepts. Here we have an example of using counters for addition, but you can use counters for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. I know your students aren't in regular classes now, but you could provide students with an activity in their distance learning materials to cut out physical counters that you might include as a separate worksheet, as a separate additional sheet, and they can use that to help with their multiplication and their subtraction, division, and additions. You can also use physical activities for science through experiments. For example, you could have students learn about the life cycle of a plant by planting a seed and documenting its growth. So maybe they'll write a short sentence and draw a picture after a period of a few days, showing how the plant grows. Students can also do simple experiments at home using common household products. So do try and include those. So this is another example that's good for maths, and it's a measuring activity. So students here would have to measure things, measure physical objects around them, and write their length, width, and height in different measurements. So this activity is designed for distance learning. It can be done at home, but you can also do these around in your classroom or around the school. So another doing activity here, this one is an example for science. So students can learn about artificial and natural objects by finding them around the school, or they can even do this around the house or in their local area. So students here have to find 5 artificial and 5 natural objects and complete this table. So the table is divided into 4 columns: the name of the object, whether the object is artificial or natural. This column allows the student to describe how it felt to touch. And the last column is for students to draw the object that they're using. Again, this is something that students can do at home in distance learning. So let's move on now to reading and writing learners. So reading and writing learners learn best when they're taking lots of notes. So it's good to include opportunities for note-taking during your lectures and presentations. And you can give your students some guidance when they're taking notes. So you might have a list of questions on the board, or if students are doing a handout, that you might have some questions before a text or after a text that help them to understand what they should be learning in the text, the most important parts of it. You can also give your students opportunities to do independent research about different topics, and you can provide them with links to do further reading and research at home. Like visual learners, reading and writing learners learn very well using handouts. So if you provide handouts with links to further reading and research, that's really beneficial to them. Also, bullet point lists are helpful. You can easily do these on the board, and you can encourage your students to do the same. Give opportunities for independent study as well. Students do like to study independently, so if it's appropriate, you can have your reading, writing learners do independent study, whilst other types of learners might be doing more physical activity or practical activity. Activities that involve turning images into diagrams. Turning images and diagrams into words are also good for your reading and writing learners. It helps them with learning and understanding. So For example, an image about a specific topic like the environment, a historical event, food or fashion. You could have your students do some writing about each, different topics, and turning diagrams into paragraphs. So remember we talked a little bit about tables and charts and graphic organizers. Reading and writing learners can do very well when translating images and diagrams into written text. So you can provide opportunities to do that. Another strategy you can use for reading and writing learners is to provide opportunities to read out loud. So this is good for reading and writing learners, but it's also good for auditory learners to hear different voices. And reading and writing learners like to organize concepts into categories and subcategories. So this helps them to understand and remember key information, and also to build ideas on top of each other. So doing essays and essay plans are also a good way to learn and show understanding. And to do that, you can have students make diagrams, such as a graphic organizer. And from that graphic organizer, they can make an essay plan. And from that essay plan, they can then organize all of their ideas and they have their ideas organized and are able to write an essay. And doing group and independent research is also very good for reading and writing learners, as well as reading activities and novel study. And for maths, word problems are also really good. So this is an example of an activity where students turn images into words. So the activity shows 3 scenarios: scenario A, scenario B, and scenario C. So students here are asked to write a paragraph about what is happening for each scenario. So students would have to look at these images, or this sequence of images, and try and guess what's happening. And they would then write a short paragraph about each scenario. This kind of activity is also good as a discussion for visual and auditory learners. This next example is an activity of turning images into words again. And so students must describe the photo and use words to make sense of these 2 images. So the idea is to have students talk about how these images are similar and how they are different. So this is a great activity for reading, writing learners, and helps them to organize similarities and differences to compare. So they might say, oh, this first image shows fast food. They might say it's healthy. They might say it's unhealthy. They might say it looks tasty or delicious. The students might say that this image here shows healthy food, that is nutritious and good for you and makes you feel good. So this activity is another good example of how to turn images into words. Okay, here we've got an example of turning diagrams into words. So the idea here is, this is a graph or chart showing students' favorite colors in the class. So having students who are reading and writing learners write a short paragraph about what's happening in the graph allows them to make sense of the data. and to draw conclusions about what it means. And categorizing is also very good for reading writing learners. This activity is a reading activity, so students read the article about different types of tree around the world, and they then complete this table. So this is helpful because it allows learners to organize the main ideas or concepts from a text, in this case, the article. So the article is about trees, and this table has 5 columns. So column 1 would be the type of tree or the name of the tree. The second column would be the region or origin, the region of origin of the tree. So where it came from. And then the next column would be about countries that have large populations of the tree, their main adaptive feature, how they survive and how they're well suited to their environment. And then a column for a drawing of the tree. So this kind of activity you could easily include in your distance learning as well. Okay, lastly, I want to talk very briefly about seating plans. So I'd encourage teachers to use seating plans in your class and to share seating plans with your students as well. So seating plans help you to organize students into more effective learning groups. And they also help groups or pairs. You could even have students working in pairs. They help you to manage behavior, plan for a range of different activities and instructions, such as station rotation. And you can split your class when you need them to work on separate things, separate skills, separate topics. So they are really helpful. And so if you look at this seating plan, you could see maybe your auditory learners would be in groups quite close to the front. You might have your reading writing learners sitting separately. They could also sit at the front, and you've got plenty of chances for group work, and the setup is nice so that the class feels separate but inclusive. I'll be uploading a short webinar soon on how to create a seating plan that suits your class. This will be really, really helpful, I think, for when school reopens and when we are back to regular classes. So I'll upload a short webinar. There's also a template for a seating plan in the shared drive, Couple of Valley School folder, in the resources folder. So if you want to use to download that seating plan template and start to play around with it and create a seating plan for your classes, this is where you can find it. So this is the last slide, well, the last 2 slides before we finish. And it's just a Venn diagram on here, which is a kind of graphic organizer that you could have your students use. And it shows different learning styles and how they overlap. So you can see in the pink circle here, you've got visual learners. In the green circle here, you have auditory learners. In the blue circle, you've got kinesthetic learners. And in the yellow circle, you've got reading, writing learners. So learners aren't suited to only one style of learning. And that's what these sections, these overlapping sections show here. So between the blue and yellow circles, you've got kinesthetic and reading, writing learners. In the middle here, you've got a learner who would be suited to all learning styles: visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and reading, writing. So this Venn diagram shows that learners learn in more ways than one. A lot of learners don't necessarily have only one learning style. So most learners don't fit into one learning style. One size does not fit all. So, for example, you could have a visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and reading writing learner, as we showed by the middle section in the Venn diagram before. So it's important to include a variety of strategies and activities in your classes and in your distance learning materials. It's also important to teach students to learn and feel comfortable learning in different ways, not just one. So if you've got a visual learner who only learns visually, you only include strategies that are visual, they're not becoming rounded learners. And so they won't feel comfortable when it comes to having to read. So it's really important that we include this variety so that our students learn different skills. So your distance learning materials can definitely include visual, kinesthetic, and reading, writing content. And remember, you can include auditory activities where possible, but make these optional, as not all of your students will have somebody to study with. So take the time to include strategies for all learning styles as well in your annual plans in the future. And finally, I'm going to be doing a workshop just so we can discuss some of these, so we can have some questions about different learning styles, and I can go through the webinar with you and hopefully help you to plan for including different learning style instruction and activities in your distance learning. So thanks everyone for watching my webinar series. This was the last part. I hope it's been helpful. Please do attend the workshop that I'll be planning. I'll post in the KVS teachers group when that will be soon. And please watch Franny Mrs. webinars on graphic organizers if you haven't already, as that they'll help you with planning for visual learners in your class.